The perfect place for a life to fall apart was a sun-drenched street in Mesa, Arizona, where the only thing sharper than the midday heat was the glint of chrome on a newly purchased motorcycle. On July 18, 2014, Isabel Celis, a bright-eyed 6-year-old with a mischievous grin, was excited for her Saturday Little League game. She lived in a modest, comfortable home with her father, Sergio, her mother, Becky, and her older brother. Sergio was a bear of a man, a respiratory therapist known for his calm demeanor, while Becky's world revolved around her children. That morning, the world was normal. Isabel ate sugary cereal, watched cartoons, and danced through the house. Later, she climbed into her parents' bed, a small, warm weight between the two people who loved her most. They were the last moments of an unbroken life. Just after 8 a.m., Sergio went to wake Isabel for her game. Her bed was empty. A screen in her window was pushed aside, its frame bent outwards into the quiet backyard. The only sound left in the house was a father's scream tearing through the suburban silence. The response was immediate and massive. Police swarmed the Celis home, a sudden bloom of blue uniforms and grim faces in a neighborhood of manicured lawns. The initial theory was a kidnapping for ransom, a horrifying but logical conclusion. The family was well liked, and Sergio had mentioned a recent, sizable cash withdrawal from the bank. The community held its breath, waiting for a demand that never came. Instead, the investigation began to curdle from the inside. The crime scene was bizarre. The window screen, the presumed point of entry, was found inside the house, leaning against the exterior wall. It hadn't been cleanly cut or forced from the outside. The fasteners were neatly removed. Detectives noted a lack of disturbance in the flower bed beneath the window. No footprints, no crushed petals. Sergio Celis's 911 call was released to the public, a decision that would irrevocably shape the case. His voice, high-pitched and frantic, was picked apart by internet sleuths and professional behavioral analysts alike. "I woke up and my daughter's not here," he cried. Some heard the raw panic of a grieving father. Others heard a performance. The focus of the investigation, like a slow, inexorable shadow, began to shift from an unknown intruder to the home itself. Sergio and Becky Celis were subjected to grueling, separate interrogations. They were asked to relive every second of that morning, their answers scrutinized for inconsistencies. The police revealed a jarring detail. Family dogs, which had been in the house that night, had not barked. The official narrative of a brazen stranger abduction in the quiet of the morning started to fracture under the weight of these strange domestic details. The media, once sympathetic, began to frame the parents with a veil of suspicion. The Celis family, once victims, were now subjects of a vicious, unproven theory. The case grew cold, a frozen monument to a missing little girl and a mystery that seemed to have no key. For years, the file on Isabel Celis gathered dust, a painful open wound for the family and a frustrating failure for the Mesa Police Department. Then, in 2017, a break came from an unexpected direction. A cold case unit, re-examining old evidence with new technology, took a fresh look at the case. They weren't starting from the 911 call or the parents' statements. They were starting from the physical evidence, scant as it was. And they found something. Minute traces of biological material, previously unidentifiable, were now able to be tested with advanced DNA analysis. The results were a seismic shock. The DNA did not match Sergio Celis. It did not match Becky. It did not match any family member. It matched a man already in the system, Christopher Clements, a convicted burglar and sex offender with a long, violent history. He was serving a prison sentence for an unrelated crime, a sinister figure who had been operating in the shadows of Mesa all along. The entire foundation of the investigation was shattered in an instant. The police had been wrong. The public had been wrong. The years of suspicion and whispered accusations had been a catastrophic misdirection. Detectives entered the interrogation room to face Christopher Clements. He was a gaunt man with hollow eyes and a network of tattoos covering his arms. He was a predator, a career criminal who moved through the world looking for vulnerabilities to exploit. He initially said nothing, offering only a cold, knowing stare. But the DNA evidence was an unassailable truth he couldn't outrun. Faced with the prospect of a death penalty case, Clements did what such men often do. He sought to trade information for his own benefit. Through his attorney, he offered to lead them to Isabel. The negotiation was a dark pact. In exchange for taking the death penalty off the table in Isabel's case, he would reveal where he had left her. The authorities agreed. Under the harsh Arizona sun, a convoy of law enforcement vehicles followed Clements' directions to a remote, desolate stretch of desert in rural Pima County, over 100 miles from Mesa. The land was brutal and unforgiving, all sharp rocks and thorny brush. Clements, in shackles, pointed to a specific spot. And there, after nearly 7 years, the remains of Isabel Celis were found. She had been brought to this lonely, forgotten place on the same day she was taken from her bed. The confirmation sent a wave of grief and rage through the community, but it also brought a grim, long-overdue form of closure. The courtroom became the final arena. Christopher Clements, now formally charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping, stood trial. The prosecution painted a picture of a monstrous opportunist. They detailed his history of late-night residential burglaries, his method of slipping into homes while people slept, his fetish for stealing personal items from his victims. The night Isabel was taken, he had likely been prowling the neighborhood, saw an opportunity in an open window, and took it. The defense was left with little to argue, the DNA evidence and his own confession forming an impregnable wall of guilt. The most powerful moments came not from forensics, but from the impact statements. Sergio and Becky Celis, aged by years of grief and wrongful suspicion, faced the man who had destroyed their family. Becky, her voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and fury, spoke directly to him. "You didn't just take my daughter," she said, her words echoing in the silent room. "You took our family, our joy, our trust in everything." Sergio, the man whose 911 call had once been weaponized against him, simply stared at Clements, his silence more powerful than any scream. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning with a verdict. Guilty. Christopher Clements was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a small measure of justice for a life brutally stolen. The story of Isabel Celis is a chilling, cautionary tale about the dangers of a rush to judgment and the hidden monsters that walk among us. The real terror wasn't a phantom from the outside. It was a man like Christopher Clements, a predator who exploited the quiet, ordinary moments of life to unleash unimaginable fear. He wasn't a mastermind, just a brutal opportunist whose evil act was nearly eclipsed by a tragic misdirection of blame. The tragedy is a double-edged sword, a little girl lost, and a family that had to mourn her while fighting to prove their own innocence. Sometimes the monster isn't a stranger in the shadows, but the neighbor who knows exactly when you're asleep. If stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe for more.